All right, and we are live. It would be helpful if I put the mic near me. That'd be a good idea, right? Good evening, everyone. It's been a crazy, crazy couple of days in the world of weather. Of course, we have Hurricane Ian, which has made landfall this afternoon to, unfortunately, a lot of destruction in southwestern Florida, major coastal flooding, major storm surge. If you follow my Twitter feed, I've been sharing all of the images. It's a serious, serious situation down there. And what? You got no sound? Oh, that would be a problem then. Let's see. Do we still have no sound? Does anyone in the chat room hear me? Okay, got sound and video on premium side. How about the chat room? Does the chat room and YouTube hear me? Hopefully so. Yes, you hear me. Okay, all right. Okay, all right, cool. All right, so where was it? Okay, so obviously Hurricane Ian has made landfall and made a serious impact on southwestern Florida. This evening, this is how impressive this storm is. And we're going to get into the impacts, climate change influences, what to expect going forward, my suspicion that the Braves are trying to use this so they can try to win the NL East, and a couple of other factors, of course, answer your questions also. And of course, there was the actual shark. No, not a Photoshop, but an actual shark ended up in the waters from this hurricane, which, honestly, it doesn't surprise me that this happened in southwestern Florida. You have a shark-infested waters over there, and you have a strong storm surge, bound to happen. But what's really impressive this evening, and what has me a little bit concerned going forward in this forecast, is that Ian is not losing a lot of strength here. It's down as of 8 p.m. at 115 mile per hour winds. Pressure's up to 960 at 8 p.m. It still has pretty nice, well structured. And remember, there's a lot, as it was moving over initially, there's a lot of swamps around here, so it could pull in some of the warmer waters around here in the swamps. And of course, you got some more landmass here, but once it gets into this area, and that is forecasted to be by tomorrow evening, it's moving back over warmer waters. And I have my suspicions that this might not be a tropical storm when it heads up towards South Carolina. And here's the reason why. All of this warm water. Now, granted, it's around 28, 29 degrees Celsius, so not as warm as what you had here. I'm not expecting a full intensification process in terms of getting back to where it was, but I'm concerned that it could strengthen back into a hurricane again before making landfall again around South Carolina. Pull up the right. Help if I share too the images. So let me pull up that again. Doing good tonight. Okay, so we got the warm waters here. This is where I'm concerned. So again, here's Ian. Pretty strong still. This is the eye right here. Pretty well established still. Nice little eye wall. Showing up here on the radar as well. Pretty well established, especially on the northeast side. Tampa really made out in this storm, thank God. But unfortunately, much of this area did not. So as it's approaching, it has the potential here of re-strengthening. And the reason why I'm concerned about that is that if you have a re-strengthening storm, then you have a little bit longer process of evolving from a tropical system to an extratropical system. And you also introduce more moisture into the equation for the forecast for us on Saturday. So those factors matter quite a bit. And here's why I'm concerned about that factor. This is from our high pressure system. This is a lot of dry air. This is a lot of moisture. As this hurricane tracks across Florida and then ends up over the coastal waters of South Carolina and North Carolina, it's going to run into this Western Atlantic ridge. This Western Atlantic ridge is going to be building towards the coast. That's what forces Ian to back into South Carolina and Georgia rather than exit out into the Atlantic. So this ridge is building because of this upper level trough that has supported this cool air that we're dealing with right now. That enhancement allows for the ridge to build back towards the coast, forcing Ian back towards South Carolina, Georgia, and North Carolina, and then it basically interacts with this dry air mass. So this dry air mass interaction allows the storm to transition from a tropical system to an extratropical system. So what that does is that it takes this moisture and it acts like a large warm front that marches right up the coast until it runs into our high pressure system in New England that blocks it dead on. And basically what you end up with by this weekend, by Saturday, is a very powerful moisture and thermal gradient, which we could see here setting up right here. And that leads to the potential for some very heavy rainfall on Saturday afternoon and evening. So in a way, it's the remnants of Ian, but at the same time, it's also the product of tropical air running into a very dry, cool air mass that we are currently have in place. And you could see the setup here that will drive the frontogenesis here to support that heavy rainfall. And so when you start getting precipitable water values in this range starting to push into southern New Jersey and the Delmarva Peninsula, that's where you can get 2, 3, 4 inches of rain very easily, and some model guidance pushing as much as 5, 6 inches of rain from basically Atlantic City down through the Delmarva Peninsula into Virginia and portions of Maryland. When we take a look at the water vapor again, you see the setup all evolving here. And what we're going to be watching for is that as Ian backs into Georgia and South Carolina, right in this area here, how fast does it develop an upper level structure at 500 millibars to drive the weather pattern such that you get this prolonged period of precipitation. So let me show you the model guidance here for this. And I have to say that now the model guidance is in pretty strong agreement. Beforehand, not so much. We had a couple days where the GFS was well off to the west, the European was far off to the east. Turns out the European ended up being right, especially if you use more of the ensemble blend. So we're going to go with that solution for now, based on how well the model guidance is handling this scenario. So here we have Ian, and in this case, the European is one of the few models that shows that re-intensification potential. So let's say that Ian gets back to, let's say, 70 to 80 mile per hour winds. Okay, a concentrated, well-established central dense overcast and a well-established moisture transport. That pushes into the coastal plain on Friday. And then you see the setup here. This setup here allows for convergence and confluence. I'll zoom in here for you. Convergence and confluence over New England. So this right here, this is a great signature for strong high pressure. This right here transports all your moisture and your lifting and your frontogenesis, which, by the way, shows up very nicely here under temperatures. So there's your thermal gradient. Here's your colder air, polar air trying to push south, tropical air pushing north. We're caught in between. There's your developing upper level low associated with what's left of Ian. And as a result, you get this constant forcing. So what you end up with at the surface is this environment showing up. So those of you along the coast, Jersey Shore, Long Island, Connecticut, but especially the Jersey Shore, Watch out for Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday for coastal flooding. Why? Because we're going to get this persistent east-northeasterly wind. You're not going to be able to drive that water out during low tides. That's going to lead to the potential for minor to moderate coastal flooding as a result. And then, during that same time period, notice the winds at 850 millibars will remain from the east. And what this signature will do is basically drive all your moisture from the Atlantic right into the coastal plain, which is why we continue on with that threat for scattered showers. So I'm looking at moderate to heavy rainfall on Saturday afternoon and evening, more isolated, widely scattered on Sunday. Then Monday and Tuesday, more widespread showers capable of heavy downpours once again until this whole system clears out. Which, honestly, I mean, it'll produce pretty good rainfall. And in this type of scenario, it will help to reduce the potential for the drought situation that we have. I don't see this as a widespread flooding event for the interior, obviously, but if you're in southern New Jersey, be prepared for quite a bit of rain in this setup. And then, after this all clears out, we end up with another trough building in, and then probably we'll get another period of mild weather taking hold by, I'd say, about October 10th, where we'll get more of influence from the Pacific taking hold. So those are my thoughts on Ian. Right now, it is still a very impressive hurricane, one that really packed quite a punch. You can see the influence of it going over land now, but as long as it sustains that core right here, it's going to have the potential to re-intensify, and we're going to have to watch that very carefully for tomorrow evening during this time. So with that, I am going to take your questions, and there's quite a few on, on YouTube and also on. So we'll start off with the premium section first, and we'll go from there. So, of course, good evening, everyone. Is there the threat that Ian, once it hits the Atlantic waters, not being fully caught on yet? It looks like it will be over some warm water east of Florida. FYI, expect the St. Johns River between easterly fetch and heavy rains to have massive flooding in Jacksonville area. I would say that the only model that I've seen actually really catch on is the European in this respect. So far, from what I've seen, I haven't gone through every model that we have available. But just look at the conditions in place. Now, I don't expect it to go back into a major hurricane or anything of that nature. But if it remains with this core, and it remains, let's say it gets off the Florida coast as a 65 mile per hour tropical storm, I don't see much in a way that would really inhibit it having the potential to re-intensify once again, to maybe pushing up to 75 or 80 miles per hour. So just logic speaking, I think that is certainly a potential. One factor to consider is possibly the increase of shear. But even still, you're going to have a strong enough structure here in place that you at least have to consider the potential of that evolving. That jet streak at 250 millibars along the East Coast is intense. Yes, it is. Let's take a look at that. Go to 250 millibars. And just look at this polar jet. That's impressive. This is textbook La Nina influence right here, with a very strong, impressive polar jet stream. What is unusual this year, considering we have a La Nina, is that our subtropical jet stream is also pretty impressive. And you can see our Western Atlantic ridge getting ready to flex and push our storm back. And also you can see very nicely here, with our hurricane, the well-established anticyclonic circulation. See, if you have this, and you have at the surface a well-established low-level circulation, then you open up the potential that, yes, this could re-intensify once again, once it gets off the coast here. It has a well-established structure at all levels, and it's just a matter of time. Now, notice, one thing that could inhibit it is that with this northwesterly flow here, yes, some dry air could work in from this influence. So that is something that could be an inhibiting factor to just keep an eye on. Do you expect there to be any sort of warm core remnant even after it makes a transition afterwards? If so, for how long? That's a great question. I expect there to be a warm seclusion, and that shows up really nicely in the model guidance, by the way. You can find that at 850 millibars. So there's your warm core. And we'll zoom in a little bit. And the model guidance keeps a small function of that right here. But I think that once it makes this transition, I think that it will only have very, very few warm core signatures, maybe below 900 millibars, primarily at the surface. You might be able to see at the radar. The one thing that would inhibit any sustained true warm core structure is the fact that it's going to be interacting with the Appalachians, which will be inhibiting some of the low-level circulation. So I would say that it would remain with a true warm core until Saturday morning, and I think that you'll start to see a real transition Saturday afternoon, and especially on Sunday, it'll be severely degraded. What is the current status of our dry boundary layer, the low-level boundary layer? Significantly more degraded than what we saw in the middle of summer. It's still present. This feature will eliminate that impact for southern New Jersey and for southeastern Pennsylvania. It's still somewhat of a factor for the interior, like the Poconos, Catskills, northwestern New Jersey. However, we're moving away from convective season to more of a stratospheric type of rainfall. And so as a result, the stratiform type rainfall usually can overcome this type of dry layer, whereas convective rainfall, it has far more of a influence and can be more of a disruptive factor. In other words, this type of scenario leads to a little bit more prolonged virga, but eventually the precipitation wins out. Is that gray box on the radar still extreme wind warning? Let's pull it up. Flash flooding. It's pretty much just flash flooding. Let's see what warnings we have here. We'll go right to the National Weather Service. And they still have an extreme wind warning out for portions of Florida. Do you expect the tropics to be quiet after Ian dissipates? I would, I was going to write this in the long-range thoughts, and so I'll touch on this very, very shortly, very briefly. We are going to be moving into a favorable period of support from the MJO. So I would not be surprised if we get a few more storms. I cannot say whether or not we're dealing with an impact on the United States, but I think that we still have the potential for some activity. Evening, Rob. Thanks for the updates. With a stronger storm back in the Atlantic, wouldn't that affect the war as such? Could that lead to further east solution? I don't know. Not a further east solution because because the Western Atlantic ridge is going to be too strong, and the ability for Ian to change the weather pattern is going to be severely degraded because it's weakened so much by the time it gets to that point. So I'm pretty confident on the track and where it's going to be evolving. I think what it would influence is the rate in which it transitions from tropical to extratropical and how that evolves. Now let's check out YouTube. We have a lot of questions. Wow, look at this. Please don't bring it to New Jersey. I don't have any choice on that. How much rain will southern New Jersey receive with the remnants from Saturday? Okay, great question. So this is really, I would say, like kind of like a three-part rain event. Okay, and let me zoom out here. So you get your first part. You know what? Let me use the model data. You get your first part right here on Saturday, right? What this feature is literally the warm air from Ian racing up the coast. And you can see that very nicely here. See that? It's essentially like a large warm front with a ton of moisture. So that's the first phase. And because we have that strong gradient, it produces very heavy rainfall. The moisture is from Ian, but it's not the core circulation nor the lifting parameters that drive Ian. In fact, it's really separated from that. It's just the moisture plus an impressive gradient leading to isotropic lifting, and thus the potential for very heavy rainfall. The core of Ian really doesn't impact the region until Monday through Tuesday, and by that point, it's more of what we call an extratropical low. So it's lost its tropical characteristics by this point, and it's producing showers, and these showers are capable of very heavy downpours. What I'm more concerned about in terms of impacts for the entire region is the clash between this high pressure system and this low pressure system, and the constant gradient northeast to easterly wind that's going to be in place, that's going to lead to coastal flooding, which I think is not being well advertised right now. So I'm concerned about that factor. So I think that's going to be a major issue. In terms of heavy rainfall, that first wave could produce somewhere between 1 to 2 inches of rain. And Sunday we get a little bit of a break, but still isolated showers hanging around. And then Monday and Tuesday we get more waves of rainfall, which could lead to another 1 to 2 inches over the time period. So I like the idea of generally about 2 to 4 inches of rain over portions of southern New Jersey and southeastern Pennsylvania, and then 1 to 2 inches over central New Jersey and the northern suburbs of Philadelphia, and then much less rainfall further north. Premium members, I made a map of that, so definitely check that out. But I would say locations like Atlantic City, Cape May, Wildwood, Millsville, those locations have the potential for some pretty impressive rainfall. But the good news is that it's not in one shot, it's over several days. And so that's going to allow for saturation into the ground. That's going to help our drought situation, and it's going to reduce the potential for significant flash flooding. Let's see, I'm going to try to get to everyone's question. Is there any more tropical waves coming off the African coast? There is actually one new tropical storm which I'm going to be updating on, but it's not a threat for us. And we are watching other tropical waves with potential for development. Let's see if I can pull up. Okay, so out here I'm watching this tropical wave. This is our tropical depression. It could become a tropical storm, but notice it's going to be lifting up into a lot of shear and interacting with a lot of dry air. So not really all that impressive in that respect. But I am watching this wave. This wave, though, might be inhibited by all this dry air that is setting up over the central Atlantic that could act like a nice little doorstop before anything gets towards our neck of the woods. Nothing developing in the Caribbean. And there, of course, is our Western Atlantic Ridge, and this is an upper level low. Start my week on LBI on Monday. Ugh, not so good. How much rain will central New Jersey, south of New York City? I like the idea of 1 to 2 inches, probably a few isolated spots pushing over 2 inches right along the coast. Does wind shear affect or hinder a hurricane? Wind shear, in general, the basic rule is this, okay? Wind shear typically disrupts a hurricane or tropical low pressure system because a warm core low has to be vertically stacked. Okay, it's like an engine. So all your warm air comes up, gets lifted, and then it gets expelled out. Okay, so this is latent heat. The moisture, the tropical moisture comes in, gets lifted up, it gets transferred into latent heat energy. That latent heat energy is expelled out, right? That's how you get your low-level cyclonic circulation and an anticyclonic circulation to expel that out. Shear comes in and disrupts that circulation. And so what happens is that the engine gets disrupted and weakens and then starts to fall apart. So there are cases where you can have strong wind shear positioned in such a way that it can enhance the outflow. Like in this case right here, right? You have strong shear, you have very strong jet streak here, but because of the position of Ian, especially when it was to the southwest of Florida, it was helping to expel the latent heat energy out. And so that enhanced the exhaust and enhanced the storm. But if the shear is located ahead of our hurricane, then it disrupts the circulation. So more times than not, yes, shear disrupts, hurts a storm. In the case of thunderstorms that we're used to, right? Vertical wind shear, which difference of winds from the surface to the mid-levels, that enhances those thunderstorms because it causes turning. And within the mesoscale construct, it enhances thunderstorm development because it enhances lifting and produces the potential for tornadoes. But the structure is always slanted. Does Northeast New Jersey have a similar forecast as Southern New Jersey? No, much drier. Still windy though, but not nearly as much rain, at least based on the current forecast I have. Let's see, or should I stay, help, or hinder a hurricane? Let's see here. Barnegat Bay, that take the boat out of the water or leave it tied up in the water? I would say leave it tied up. We're not talking about a major flooding event here or a major nor'easter. Just a persistent easterly wind around 15 to 30 miles per hour. So depending on what you're used to in the bay, I would definitely reach out to any of the authorities that handle that situation, what they want to do as well. But this isn't a major flooding event, in my opinion. What are the chances it goes up the coast right to Jersey? 0. Wrong type of pattern for this. Too many blocking features. How is Ian compared to Ada last year for North Jersey impact? Vastly different scenario and setup. Okay, different forcing mechanisms, a period of rainfall, and structure of the storm itself. Based on what you are seeing, excuse me, how you compare Ida remnants to New York City to this? I don't think it's really comparable. There are different type of scenarios. For one, in Ida, you actually had the warm core structure, the actual tropical low, focused and concentrated. Whereas in this scenario, that's a bad call against the Mets. In this scenario, you don't really have that. The actual warm core structure, warm core low is far away and not really a same scenario. Yankees or Mets? Well, I'm a Mets fan, as you just heard. Thank you for all the great information. No problem. And, of course, RC, also, you're welcome. All right. And the Mets got out of it. Good. Well, they're still down 2-0, though. Yeah. Let's see here. You expect Ian to, let's see here. Oh, these are some good questions now. Let me scroll up from the premium chat. The 10 millibar polar vortex is really getting going now, but is definitely a bit warped. 70 millibars is very warped and mostly over Asia. Cold air at all levels over Siberia and parts of Asia. Yes, there is the evolution of the polar vortex is going to be very interesting to study. Let me pull that up here. Let me zoom out. We'll go to 70 millibars. The polar vortex, for those of you who don't know, is a major factor in determining what to expect with our weather pattern for the winter. A strong polar vortex leads to basically a milder weather pattern and one where you tend to get less winter storms. A weak polar vortex leads to more high latitude blocking and the potential for more winter storms and cold air transport, regardless of what's going on, whether you have El Nino or La Nina. Now, one thing we usually watch for is the state of the sea ice and the state of the snow cover in Siberia. The key factor here with those two features is that their influence is dependent on the state of the polar vortex in the late fall and early winter. So if you have a strong polar vortex to start off with, and you have above normal snowfall and below normal sea ice, then yes, there will be a disruption of the polar vortex, but it takes longer to have that influence, and your high latitude blocking is not as strong. But I found over the past 5 to 10 years is that when the polar vortex is weak initially, and then you have those environments in place, then you're going to see a higher potential for high latitude blocking and for a negative Arctic oscillation and negative North Atlantic oscillation. With that said, right now what I am seeing here is a polar vortex that is disrupted right now already. So something that we're going to be keeping an eye on over the next couple of weeks, and I'll be updating on in the premium long-range thoughts. Do you expect Ian to have an impact on the overall upper level pattern? Not too much, mostly because the storm will be significantly weakened by the time it gets into the higher latitudes. If this was going up the Western Atlantic as a Cat 5, absolutely. But in this scenario, no. Any activity in Western Pacific at the moment? Let me recheck that, because we did have that one storm, but nothing really was standing out. So let's see what we got here. We have Kulop, but that's not really too strong. It's already transitioned into a extratropical storm. That could enhance the trough. Now here's one that could be interesting. Roku. God, I gotta love these names. I probably am butchering these names to no end. But yeah, this looks like something that could be something to watch out for. It looks like pretty much a strong tropical storm, maybe pushing to hurricane strength. That could be something to definitely keep an eye on. And then Noru is not a threat for influence. So there's some activity, but nothing of again, what you want to look for in terms of impacts on the western from the Western Pacific on the 500 millibar pattern are Category 3 or higher hurricanes or typhoons lifting up into the Northern Pacific. Right now we don't have that, but something to just keep an eye on as we move forward. High tide won't be able to drain in the easterly fetch. It's persistent to Barrier Islands or other typical coastal areas that flood look like they could be pretty bad just because of duration, if nothing else. Absolutely, I agree. And I've been warning about this going back to like this past weekend, that hey, this could be an issue. You don't always need a powerful storm to cause coastal flooding, especially when we've altered the coastline so much. So, again, remember, barrier islands were not meant to be lived on. They were meant to be barriers for the coastal plain. So, when you have that factor and you have people living on there, then yes, the coastal flooding will become a greater and greater issue. I think Ian makes it further east towards North Carolina, South Carolina border as the NAM and UK Met show. It may have opportunity to strengthen if so. The problem with the NAM and the UK Met is that they underestimate the Western Atlantic Ridge. Even now, if you do a comparison between the actual observations and the model output for this point at 0Z, it's well below. And so that allows for the more eastward track. The reason why we had the landfall when we did for Ian was because the storm got larger and stronger, and because it got larger and stronger, it felt the trough a little bit more and was able to turn. But those models, the reason why they're doing a further east solution is because they underestimate the Western Atlantic Ridge, and so they don't push it far enough west. That's why you're seeing that, and that's why I kind of threw out the NAM and the UK Met based on that factor. Do you think we could get a tropical storm like Ida after this storm? I can not confirm nor deny that potential. We have tropical season through October, so obviously something like that could happen. There's no data right now to support an expectation of that. I'll put it that way. It's not good to make statements saying that there will or won't be a tropical system impact during the middle of hurricane season for the Mid-Atlantic or Gulf Coast or Southeast. The only time you can really make that type of statement is if you know for a fact that there would be a deep trough locked in onto the East Coast, able to knock any of these storms out. And even in that scenario, look, we have a deep trough over the eastern United States. The orientation was just a little bit off. And now we have a hurricane marching through Florida with remnant impacts pushing up into the Mid-Atlantic. So I think that it is likely irresponsible and a bit dangerous to make a definite statement on whether or not you would end up in that scenario. With that said, I think that's a great segue into going into discussion on some of the statements on climate influences from this. I will say this. There are some out there that say climate change caused this storm. That would be inaccurate. It's hurricane season. These storms happen. It is part of the actual climate environment, and climate change did not cause these storms. In fact, there is no data to support that type of statement. However, you can say that the influences of climate change, specifically this part right here, where you got the above normal sea surface temperatures. Let me pull that up. When you're talking about, at one point you had 31 degrees Celsius water out here, that certainly could be a byproduct of climate change, in which you could say the water is warmer, so there's a better potential for rapid intensification. Another factor is that you have more enhanced 500 millibar heights, which can enhance the ability for these storms to vent out, which can support the potential for rapid intensification. So, as I always say, climate change is not a cause, it's a steroid. So think of it like this way. You have muscles naturally. If you go to the gym naturally and you bench press and you do your curls and stuff, you will get stronger, right? Natural process. If you do that and take steroids, guess what? You get stronger and then your whole body goes out of whack, right? Because you're messing up with the natural state of your body. Well, climate change and CO2 influence is the same type of idea. It doesn't cause the storms, but it enhances them. Creates a little bit more of an imbalance in the atmosphere. And that's how you end up in these scenarios. Combine that with natural or geographic sinking and the fact that we're building in swamps and in some locations where we shouldn't be building. That's how you end up in these scenarios. Thoughts on when the rain will arrive in Saturday in central Jersey? Basically, I'm looking for the rainfall to push in afternoon. I might get a few showers in the morning hours after 10 a.m., but I think the bulk of the rain will be kicking in the afternoon after 12 p.m. from south to north. Let's see. Icon develop an inverted trough Sunday and Monday with heavy rainfall. I think if you get enough stretching in the atmosphere, and it kind of depends on the orientation of the upper level low. Let's see if I can pull that up here. Let's see. We're getting to that time of year where we start to pull up all the weird models. The icons and all that stuff. I get it. But if you want to study inverted trough, what you want to do is see what it's doing at 500 millibars. Okay. I see what it's doing. Let's see what it looks like at the surface here. Yeah. surface. So notice I start from the top of the atmosphere and work my way down. Okay. So what the icon's doing, and we'll go back to 500 millibars. In fact, we'll use a vorticity here. Is that is supporting a strong upper level low remaining in place, and then it tries to drop this short wave behind it, like this. And then you get all this bending here in the atmosphere. This short wave ridge, and then kicking in the back and trying to expand the upper level low. There's a lot going on here in the icon, in which you have to have timing of the short wave just right. You have to have, it's also closing off the upper level low in Ohio, and also keeping a closed low around North Carolina. So what you end up with is all this stretching in the atmosphere, and that's how you end up with an inverted trough. There's a lot here that could go wrong in that type of solution, though. For one, the timing of the short wave diving into the Ohio River Valley, whether or not it's actually going to be weaker, because this could actually be sheared apart. So there's a lot of questions here in which I would not trust the icon in this solution, because what you need here is for this short wave to not be sheared apart in interaction with this short wave. You also would need for this portion here not to keep this separated, and that you don't get this weird ridging that's taking place here between these two and this. You're getting too much interaction here between these ridges here, and there isn't very good balance in terms of mass in the atmosphere. So you would need to have these two features separated for a correct amount of time, not to shear off against each other, and at the same time to support this stretching here that you see in the atmosphere. Look at the winds here. See how this is going out to the east, this is going from south to north, this is going from the west. So you're getting all this stretching and boundaries here that take place, and so that's how you end up with your inverted trough. When you have this much of a complication in the model guidance, it's best not to jump on it, so to speak. My favorite hurricane moment is the one that hit Galveston when Jim Cantore was looking towards the beach and yells about the idiot on the wall who was going to get himself killed. Turns out the idiot was Geraldo Rivera. Oh, yeah, that makes sense. Let's see. Already hearing about the most costly storm to hit Florida. My family vacationed on Sanibel Island, and when I was a kid, it was inexpensive but cheap hotels. Now it has multi-million-dollar homes. Guess where the cost is coming from? Of course, building. Of course. Yet ACE globally is record lows for the last 3 years. Yeah, I mean, using the ACE score, this is why I really, really cringe when news outlets try to connect any type of major storm to climate change. And the reason why is because it's so easy to tear the argument apart, and then you weaken the argument for climate change and what's happening. And then you create the avenue for a lot of these weird conspiracy theories and stuff. So that's why I'm against it, because it's a poor argument to make. Okay? Because it's not something that is well supported. And what I think is that we should focus on well supported data, not hype. Thoughts on when the rain will arrive in Saturday? We already talked about Central Jersey. All right, so I think we got all the questions answered on Facebook. I mean on YouTube. Excuse me. And yeah, of course, Tom Moore is back with NYNJPA Weather, providing pieces every Friday about about history. He's working on one right now, but it sounds like another great piece on the way. So definitely, I hope you guys enjoy it. It's a good thing to learn about history and understand the storms of the past, so that way you can forecast in the future. I didn't know you personally hate the icon, Steve. I have no hate. I just don't trust when guidance does that. When the model guidance does that, where it creates funky upper level lows and weird boundaries in the upper levels, that right there, and of course you got one going into a negative tilt, the other one in a positive tilt. This not good, not good at all. What I would like to see is that if this did not close off as an upper level low, and you just had this strong short wave diving into the back of this while it's pulling out, and you didn't have this ridge trying to drop in and try to close off and connect and then cause this into a full upper level low. If you just had it diving in on the back side, it might have been more realistic. You ready for winter? Getting there. We're definitely working on the winter forecast and diving into that. And I think it's going to be a real challenge. They're always a challenge. Winter forecasts are always a challenge, but this year is going to be even more of a push to really forecast for this year. Because I could see this forecast going in so many different ways. It's concerning, to say the least, in how to organize this forecast. Mets down 3-0. I don't know why, but they can never. The Marlins have been a pain in the neck for the Mets forever. They should just contract them because I don't like them. Let's see here. Any significant changes to ocean temperatures this week? Nothing that really stands out. Let me zoom out here. We still have our La Nina in place. Indian Ocean still is cooling. Very warm in the northern Pacific, northern Atlantic. Some influence here from our hurricanes, obviously is supporting some cooling here. But the overall theme remains the same. Not much change in that. With the pressure, excuse me, with the pressure gradient that strong, with the pressure gradient that strong, what sort of wind speeds are you forecasting? Right now, I'm looking at 15 to 30 mile per hour sustained with higher gusts. I will tweak that based on more data I get. Once we get a better idea of the type of storm that we have coming into the Carolinas and Georgia, then I can make a better forecast in terms of the pressure gradient. The reason why is that if we end up with a stronger low pressure system, then that obviously is going to mean that we're going to have a stronger pressure gradient between the high pressure system. And that transition from a tropical low to extratropical low will have to be considered in that respect. So you kind of see my point there is that once we get a better idea on the strength of the storm after the second landfall, or really the third landfall, then we can get a better idea on what to expect with this pressure gradient. And then what to expect for our surface winds. Okay, we got about 10 minutes to go, and then we're going to shut it down for the night. I'm going to get some tea. It's that time of year for the fall for me where I start to lose my voice and it start to get groggy and broken up. So that's always fun. And it's always that time of year. Let's see the state of our hurricane right now. And it's still very impressive. Pretty good eyewall structure still in place here. Pretty well established circulation. Good feeder bands coming in. Let's see if we can get updated. I mean, I gotta admit, it's slowing down a bit, but it's still, pretty well established over Florida. And what I like about it, what I'm impressed about, is that it still has a very well organized central dense overcast here. Of course, nowhere near as strong as what it was before it made landfall, but it's established enough that it has that potential of refiring again. In other words, it's not getting torn apart by any shear. It's not collapsing. You don't see any dry air coming in on the backside. It's still very well established. So the core is intact. Let's see if we got any updates. Let's see, we're probably another 10 minutes away from another update. But yeah, I mean, I would say what we have here still is pretty impressive. So what exactly are the Braves? All right, let's see here. I got a couple. That's because you're yelling at the Chiefs in addition to the Mets. Probably, yeah. Speaking of football, the Cowboys' defense is elite. Well, I mean, they play the Giants. Let's see how they play. They certainly are off to a good start. So what exactly are the Braves trying to do? Okay, so great question. Let me pull this up here. In fact, here we go. Okay, so we know that our hurricane's coming in. And here we are. They're supposed to play on Friday evening. And you can see the rainfall here. Now, the Mets offered to play the game tonight that's going on tonight earlier, fly down, either play tomorrow or Friday afternoon, which would avoid any chance for there being any type of rain delay or impact from the storm. They can get the game in, no big deal, everyone's done. Braves turned that down. Why? Because you have a much better chance of having a rain delay or postponement on Friday evening, which then disrupts our starting pitching, which would obviously defeat them, right? So instead of doing that, we have a chance now for there being a rain delay or a postponement on Friday, and then Saturday and Sunday, a potential for one of those days being a doubleheader, which again would go against the Mets in that respect. Now look, they're the home team. They have every right to do this. And quite frankly, the Mets put themselves in this position by not beating teams like the Marlins right now. So I can't gripe too much, but it's pretty blatant. And I'm kind of hoping that they do get a chance to play on Friday evening. But I don't like the way it's looking right now. But we'll see. We'll see how that works out. That band to the east looks like it could have some nasty squalls, storms, and tornadoes. This one out here, yeah. And there, let me zoom out here. So, what we're going to be dealing with the structure is that as this rotates back towards the Carolinas and Georgia, this feature right here is going to basically orient itself to act like a warm front and march through the Carolinas and right up the coast. And that's going to lead to some very heavy rainfall and, potential for some localized flash flooding. The Yankees host the Orioles this weekend. Yeah, they deserve a break. God bless them. Hey, look, they did a great job this year locking down the AL East. Let's see here. Are the Mets going to win the division? I think that, you know what, I still believe the Mets will pull this out somehow, some way. We'll see what happens. I mean, look, we'll see what happens with the Braves game tonight, and we'll see. Who knows, the Mets may go on a 6-run tear in one inning, so we'll see what happens. But I don't know. I mean, look, the Braves, people are acting like the Braves were like some like upstart team. They're the former world champion, so, you know, give them a little credit too. They're a great team, great management, So it's not like some like team that came out of nowhere. They're last year's world champions. So, you gotta give them respect. Do you expect significant wind shear by the time it works its way up to our area? By the time it gets up to our area, wind shear will no longer be a factor because it will be an extratropical storm. In fact, the jet stream dynamics might actually enhance the storm. In fact, here, let me pull that up here. We'll pull up 300 millibar winds. Yep. You see this jet streak here? That's going to enhance your divergence and diffluence and your heavy rainfall. So the jet dynamics for Saturday, and especially for Monday and Tuesday, looks to be pretty supportive for waves of rainfall, because you have that divergence and diffluence setting up. All right, so we got a lot of good questions here for tonight. Outstanding job, guys. I really appreciate it. We're going to call it a night for tonight. I will continue to update and provide the latest information on our upcoming storm. So definitely, if my final closing thoughts for this weekend is, if you have plans for this weekend, Saturday looks rather wet, especially in the afternoon and evening. Sunday is more of a hit and miss showers, and then Monday and Tuesday looks to be more scattered showers capable of heavy downpours. If you're on the immediate coast, be prepared for coastal flooding. Be prepared for potential for minor to moderate flooding. There could be some spots of major flooding, but I'm not ready to go there yet. Winds right now, I'm looking at 15 to 30 miles per hour on the coast, 10 to 20 miles per hour as you move inland, with some higher gusts. If Ian makes the third landfall into South Carolina stronger as a hurricane, then we'll have to reevaluate the pressure gradient and maybe bump up those winds a little bit more. But I like the 15 to 30 mile per hour range based on the pressure gradient and the type of situation we're dealing with. That's pretty much it for tonight. Thank you again for coming in here and visiting and asking your questions and following along. And as always, stay safe out there.